Well, here we are. It's not quite noon and not quite, hold on, let's change this up. There we go. Not quite noon and not quite 8 a.m. Kind of a in-between time for the Astro Weather today, mainly because I will not be doing the Friday forecast. There's just still too much going on move-wise, but we will. Let's see, Sunday night is Christmas Eve, right? Yeah, I don't think there's going to be an Astro Weather. I'm sorry, Sunday Night Astro Live. Probably not happening. And we're also probably not going to do serious sports because no Al's out of commission. I think we crank this thing back up again on Tuesday. It gives me some time to put the new studio together and sort of resume regularly scheduled programming. So thank you for your patience as we put the new systems in place. You're going to see a Peachy sighting. There she is. The Phantom Peachy. Peach, you want to come back? You want to come back? What are you doing? Yeah. So Peachy has discovered. Well, come say hi to people. Come say hi to people. Come on over. Come on. Come on up here. Yeah. Oh, we got some sun happening here in the sunroom. Here, come on. Yeah. Here she is. Oh, the always entertaining Peachy. Never a dull moment with Peachy. Let me tell you. Never a dull moment. So we have the random, how would I say this? This is kind of a rural area, but it's also kind of suburban. So we have the random suburbal, call them suburbal animals. And I think Peachy just spotted her first squirrel in the sunroom. And she's primed and ready for action. Jasper noticed, but it's never that big a deal for Jasper. He'll check it out, and then he'll just go back to Jasperville. Peachy, on the other hand, is kind of like weirdly obsessive about certain things. Anyway, thanks for being here. We had a nice little get together with our friend Leela, putting together a wonderful little online solstice gathering, and just hanging out. And it was very sweet, and just people talking about their lives and family and kind of what they do for traditions during the holiday. And it was a nice way to spend the first day officially of winter. It's really paradoxical, isn't it, that it's the first day of winter, but it's also the return of the light, which I find absolutely fascinating. So we're headed into the darkest time, and yet the light is now incrementally returning to us by fractal, by solar fractal on a daily basis. So it's always an interesting time of year. We think that we head into the dark with Scorpio, but Capricorn is actually a dark time in and of itself. And today's star of the day is a very Capricornian character, which we'll talk about. And there's something rugged and you know what? I'm right back. I thought I could get away with this. Just don't go away. Do not go away. I'll do that. Yeah, sorry about that. I thought I could go cowboy with power and get through the show on battery, but once it hits the little red zone, you can't do it that way. And it's a Mercury retrograde, right? Of course it is. So we have to take that into account. Just zip this up. There we go. All right. Whoop. All right. I can live with that. Okay. So we're talking about Capricorn. Yeah, I mean, there's something, rugged and austere and craggy and foreboding about the sign of Capricorn. Am I right? And while it's not as like dark and intense as the underworld vibes of Scorpio, there is something dark about Capricorn. And this is not a slight to any Capricorn people, trust me. I really like Capricorn. Generally, where Capricorn people are coming from, right? Like where they're coming from. They're pretty straightforward for the most part, unless they have some weird aspects to their sun sign. But they're pretty much straight shooters, which I appreciate. And they can be very blunt and at times very curt in terms of how they communicate and operate, which again I appreciate. But there is that sense about them that in their own psyche, in their own consciousness, they're occupying sort of the outcropping or the sort of solitary peak, in their own world. And while they're not as detached as Aquarians, Capricorns can be difficult to reach sometimes. Again, it has to do with this sense of, elevation, because it's the highest Earth sign, right? And it's really at the top of the chart where you reach the midheaven and the peak. And that's really, in a lot of ways, the totality of the Capricorn consciousness. They're like up there, right? And they're kind of looking down on sort of the rest of the chart, literally, right? So, of course, if you're a Capricorn and your sun is in a different part of the chart, it's going to have a different flavor. By and large, that's the nature of Capricorn. And I think with that remoteness and that kind of solitary feeling that you get with Capricorn, there is that sense of darkness. Like when I think of Nixon, I think of Nixon, the Capricorn, as that kind of solitary figure, alone in his own kind of paranoia. Some of it well deserved, really, because he didn't really know who to trust at any certain point in time, and a certain darkness that went along with. You can just see Nixon kind of agonizing over those hours where his not just his political life and career, but his entire legacy is slipping before his very eyes, right? And so Capricorn brings with it that kind of archetypal sense of, sort of, I wouldn't say foreboding, but that they have that quality, and they're serious people. Capricorn are serious people until they get older, and when they get older, they tend to lighten up and they realize that they've endured life's trials and life struggles, and they've reached many of their goals, and their youth gene really starts to kick in. It's really interesting that Joe Flacco, who plays for now the Cleveland Browns, Joe Flacco is, I think, 38 or 39 years old, and he hasn't really played much serious football in about a year or 2 years. And Joe Flacco is a Capricorn, and he's back in the NFL, and he's actually playing really well. And that's what you get with Capricorns. You get longevity, and you get somebody who can continue to crank out quality work, over a very long period of time. I'm not mistaken, let me see if I'm right here. My instincts are right. Okay, I'm not right on that, so I'm not going to go there. Anyway, so here we are in Capricorn season, the first official day of winter, and we are hurtling towards Christmas. And Christmas Eve is on Sunday night. I think that's an interesting time for Christmas Eve. Whether you believe in the nativity story taking place on the 24th of December, I personally don't. There's enough energy that's been, how do I say this, invested in that night, so that it has a life of its own, right? A lot of people, ask me, well, how does astrology work? Well, one of the reasons astrology works is because we've invested so much energy into this idea or the monad of astrology that it takes on a life of its own. I haven't really talked about it, but I think that that's quite true. And the same can be said for Christmas Eve, where we imbue this meaning, even though it might be a completely different celebration, right? Saturnalia, Sol Invictus, the return of the sun, the return of the light, the theoretical birthday of Tammuz, and the reincarnation or the resurrection of Nimrod. All those are part of this story at this time of year. Even with all of that, we have imbued so much of the Christian story into this time of year that it is resonant, whether or not it's the actual day and time that it took place. Does it matter? I mean, I think if we're being sticklers for historical and cosmic perspective, maybe, but things generate. It's almost like a positive egregore. Like people create these egregores, and there are these life forces or these forces that take on a life of its own. So perhaps what we have is a positive egregore, and we throw Sunday night into it, right? Which Sunday has its own implications. And I guess if you were looking at this version of Silent Night, that Sunday night is the most silent night, and it's the return of the sun or the Son of God, right? So it's an interesting night. Just when you just kind of go down that path, and you are, playing in that field, I think that energy is available. And so if you are interested in that, and you can feel your way into it, then there's a great deal of, I would say, because you know what I think, here's another point. I don't think God cares, right? I think this idea of God, which is something that we can't even begin to comprehend, it's just so massive, right? We can't even begin to comprehend it. But I don't think God cares. Like, okay, you want it to be the 24th of December? Okay. We'll create the field for that. And there will be miracles that are going to be abundant during that time. But you want it to be 9/11? Okay. Well, we'll have something around that as well. So I don't really think God is attached to this idea of the birth of the sun if you are involved in that story. I think it's like, okay, here we go. Make it so, right? And I think that's interesting. That transcends even the manipulation of dates and times. That's just my own little 2 cents around it. All right, why don't we do this? Let's get into some Astro Weather, and then our star of the day, and then I'm going to wish you all a very, very, very Merry Christmas. By the way, I was over on, I had to fix the coffee, buy me a coffee link, because for whatever reason, it was being kind of tossed into 404 territory. That's been fixed. And I want to say thank you to everyone who has purchased a cup of coffee and supported the show and supported Astro Weather. I think this is the only show I really asked for the coffee on. This feels like like a appropriate time, because it is a kind of a coffee show. But thank you all for that, and it has helped during the move, because we've accrued just a tremendous amount of expenses with the move, just the physical logistics of the move and paying the movers. I think we're around $1,800 with the movers, and that's probably still a pretty good deal if you think about it. And these guys are really, really good. So thank you for your help. We certainly appreciate it. All right, let's get into the Astro Weather and our very interesting star of the day. Okay, here we go. Friday, December 22nd, 2023. Look, Mercury has moved into an exact conjunction with the sun. And I guess we can have the Kazemi effect. This is one of these days where it's interesting. Like, where are you going to put your footing? Are you going to put your footing on solid ground or speculation? Solid ground or speculation? Take a chance and take a risk, or take the sure thing. Today's a sure thing day. Today is a sure thing day, because what we have here is we have the sun squaring Neptune, and with that Mercury squaring Neptune and Mars squaring. So these are the three big movers, right? They're the three big movers in the chart. And, this is a motion, energy, and the totality of being. And they're squaring off against Neptune. And under those conditions, clearly there's some degree of I would say duress, right? I would say duress. And how I would define that is, watch your emotional state. Like, this is an important factor today. Watch your emotional state. If you receive quote unquote bad news, or if you hear about things that are less than positive, or Trump has been banned from another state somewhere, just slow the roll, right? Slow the roll. I remember there was this time when I was it was my honeymoon during my first marriage, and we were in Maui, and we had just gotten there, and and I went swimming, and I was in pretty good shape. I was pretty good swimmer, so we swam way out into this kind of break, and I looked at my wife at the time, and she looked at me. She said, "I think we should swim back in," because we were getting pretty far out, and I'd never swam in Hawaii before, so I was encountering. Well, I had swam, but not there. I was encountering these riptides, right? These undercurrents, and I was really struggling. I was, but I was in good shape, and I managed to somehow power through, the cross current or the undertow. Right, I was able to do that. She had done it before. She'd been there before. She knew. She'd lived in Hawaii, so she understood how the tides and the currents went. So what she did is she just kind of like let them kind of go, and then she would swim in between, which is what you're supposed to do, like the riptide and the undercurrent. And the reason I'm bringing that up is because what she was doing is she was in the sextile to Saturn, right? She was understanding the pattern. She was understanding the cycle. She was understanding the wave, and then she would kind of move with it. Me, on the other hand, I'm paddling against Neptune, and I nearly fucking drowned, right? And so I got there. It was not a great initiation, but it is what it is, right? So this is the metaphor for today, right? Just kind of notice, lay back and see where the trends are, see where the tide is going, see where the currents are going, but don't react to them, right? Don't try not to be in reaction mode. There's a lot of fear here with this Neptune square, and with Mars coming in and Sagittarius squaring Neptune. That's holy hell, right? That is holy hell. And all of a sudden, these states are deciding, well, we're going to kick them off the ballot. It's happening To me, that's all planned out. They could have waited till after the first of the year, but no. They're going to do it during Christmas season, and they're going to bum people out, right? And you have all these people that are up in arms. And now you have Ron DeSantis, who says, no, I'm not going to stand with Vivek. Like, that Vivek is, whatever you think of Vivek, or as Dr. Shiva calls him, Vivek the Snake, he is a fucking sly motherfucker, right? That guy's playing some 3D chess, because he forced their hand by saying, I'm going to stand with President Trump and pull out of this, even though it will not stand with the Supreme Court. And they know that, right? But Vivek did that. And what did he do? He forced the hand of Christie and Haley and DeSantis. And DeSantis said, no, I'm not going to pull out. Like, now all of a sudden, how does DeSantis look? How does DeSantis look? I guess the reason I'm bringing this up is because they want people to expend their energy into that, right? Get all up in arms over that. And democracy's in peril, or the republic's in peril, and we're one step closer to a civil war. Well, some of that may be true, right? If you're paying attention, it won't work. It will not work, because if you read the language that is attached to that little, bill or bylaw that they passed, it has to go to the Supreme Court. Supreme Court's not going to vote on it until after the primary. Trust me. So it's all for naught. It's really, as the Germans would say, Sturm und Drang, right? So now that gets us into the Mars-Saturn sextile. It's like, so what, right? So there's going to be a lot of looshiness in the air right now, right? Because what we have theoretically, again, we'll call it the PE, or the positive egregore, or the spirit of the season. And people are supposed to be festive, and this idea that there's the return of the sun, or the return of the light. And you could say the return of the sun is the sun, S-U-S-O-N or S-U-N. Like, it's baked into this time of year. People are a little bit nicer to each other, theoretically. Merry Christmas, right? And then they want to dump on it. This is the dump. This is the dump in the, oh yeah, Merry Christmas. Here, let me take a shit on your Christmas tree. How do you like that? Right? So we have to pay attention to that. And Saturn says it's gonna be fine. We're in the season of Saturn, right? We're in the season of Saturn. We got the sun coming in, sextiling Saturn. So by the time we hit Christmas Day, we got that almost exact Sun Saturn sextile. Today, Saturn is sextiling the moon, it's sextiling Jupiter. Everything's going to be fine, right? Just for the next 3 to 4 days, just affirm and decree everything's going to be fine. Everything is perfect and in its right place, in spite of the fact that they want to yank your chain and get you to expend all your energy on things you have absolutely no control over, right? That's what it's about. Now, the same thing could be said, potentially, for when you get together with family. We've got the Mars square. The sun will still be in square, although it'll be separated at that point. And again, is somebody going to, fire a shot across the bow at Christmas dinner? You don't have to bite. You don't have to say, okay, well, how did that work for you? The best thing you can do is just let it roll off you. When you are in a situation like that, and somebody, without threat of violence, and that's the important part, without threat of violence, when somebody continues to come at you and harp and even make it personal, if you can just hold your center and go, okay, well, that's what you think. All right, well, that's what you think. What you'll do is you'll watch them just implode. You'll watch them implode. And then they'll expose themselves. I can't believe this. I can't believe this. You won't even engage with me around this. I'm getting up. I've had enough of this dinner. Well, how's that going to make that person look? Not very good, right? And you're not doing it so that you can expose them, but if it happens, it happens, right? Exposure is part of the deal. But what you're really working on is the word is implacable. Implacable. And you don't have to be moved by other people's drama. You can if you want. I mean, you can go on a crusade, but you don't have to. Even today, the sun is coming in and trining the moon. And the moon in Taurus is grounded. And we're looking for a grounded response. We're looking for a grounded relationship with it. The moon in Taurus is all about hearth and home and making a fire and having, I don't know, a cup of meat or something. You know what I'm talking about? Baking, like get into it, right? This is a good day to get into it. And fuck the world. The world will be there. 4 days from now, 5 days, fuck the world. Just create a nice, safe, not safe, I don't like the word, a nice, comfortable, warm, grounded, appreciative, celebratory space. That's all you got to do. All you got to do. The moon is squaring Pluto, which is funny because they're both in Earth signs. But by the time we get into the early part of the evening, the moon is going to be separating from Pluto. So I wouldn't stress out about that too much. If anything, Pluto will dredge up some fears around finances and credit and all the stuff that goes along with extending your finances over the holiday season. Let it go. Just let it go, right? Saturn basically is saying everything's going to be okay. Lean into it. Lean into the fact that things are going to be solid and grounded. And all you got to do is just put one foot in front of the other. One little step up the mountain. One little step up the mountain. One little step up the mountain. That's the Capricornian plan. We got that Venus trine with Neptune. Wonderful, right? It's a wonderful trine. We talked about it being in the third decan yesterday, putting it in the Cancerian decan. Healing, connection, redemption. And it's this interesting opposition with Uranus. To me, that represents connecting with other people that are outside of your comfort zone. And sometimes life will do that. Sometimes life will throw you a speed bump or, take you down, the wrong street. And next thing you know, you're having an interaction with somebody that you had no idea or plan that you're going to have that interaction with. It could be a complete stranger, or it could be somebody you actually know that for whatever reason pops into your life. And it's like, what the fuck are you doing here? And it's like, I guess we got to find out. Right. So the Venus-Uranus opposition brings with it a high degree of surprise. We also have this in conjunct with Mars. And it's like, that's interesting because you get into this potential for ideological conflict. So if you run across somebody that has been in your life and pops in out of the blue, and there has been some degree of conflict, you can heal it. The Venus-Neptune trine, it's a beautiful thing. It'll be there all the way through Christmas. So the vibes for Christmas are good. The moon will be in Gemini. So dealing with siblings, right? Extended family should be fun. We'll have a Moon-Mars opposition. Stay away from debate. Stay away from debate.
Just trust me on this. Stay away from debate. Unless, of course, your family has a healthy spirit of debate, in which case, debate away. Go for it. But that Moon-Mars opposition, I think, especially in those two signs, can be, the Moon in Gemini can be kind of cutting in a lot of ways. And be careful with driving. I keep reiterating this, especially on Christmas Day and the day after Christmas with that Moon-Mars opposition. Really watch where you're going on the road. Anything else here? I think that's about it. I think it's about it. Everything's going to be cool. We can address the fall of the world next week. All right. Where's our star of the day? All right, don't forget to hit the like button if you enjoy this content. Please subscribe. If you subscribed previously, make sure that you're still subscribed, because there's a really good chance, guess what? You've been unsubscribed. I've been at 13,800 people since I started pretty much doing Astro Weather, which is a year. It's a year. And I do my best not to live with this idea that my channel is just completely flatlined and not growing. But at this point, it's kind of ridiculous. All right. So here we go. This is your True Hemp Science Star of the Day. Let me get my banner up. All right. Your True Hemp Science Star of the Day is Edgard Varese. And there were some other people today. We could have done Ted Cruz, but Ted Cruz is boring. Varese is very interesting. And you can just look at him. He feels like a Capricorn, doesn't he? It's like he's got claws. He's got claws. And he's got that, his face is not symmetrical at all. And you'll see this with the Capricornian type. They're not symmetrical people. Even somebody like Faye Dunaway, who's a beautiful Capricorn, you'll find an imperfection. That's the nature of Capricorn. There's something about them that is not always balanced and symmetrical. In Capricorn rising, you'll often find some form of a defect in the physiognomy of the person. Sometimes a leg can be longer than the other. They can have specific birthmarks. Things that stand out, right? Because that's kind of the nature of Capricorn. And Varese is an interesting character because he's way ahead of his time. He's really one of the fathers of modern music. And he grew up he was born in Paris way, way back in 1883. So he's part of the 19th century. And he winds up moving to Burgundy when he's young. And he's a very interesting character. He pays lots of attention to sounds, the sounds of a blacksmith hammering on the anvil. There was a very large church that he would go to in Burgundy and spend like a lot of time in this church. And he did it because he believed that the church had possibilities for sound, even at a young age. He was a classically trained composer whose influences of the day were people like Debussy and Berlioz. And he had a very successful career as a conductor in Paris. He left home at an early age. He despised his father. And what's interesting is, all these planets that are in his 12th house, he has Saturn, he has Pluto, he has Chiron and Neptune. And, the outer planets are the gods of the chart, and so the 12th house is the soul, right? It's the house of the soul, and Varese was driven. You'll see that with Pluto 12th house people. They're driven in some capacity or form, either for fame or to kind of. It's like the fire of their soul is just burning, right? And Neptune is in rulership here, domicile in the 12th house, even though it's in Taurus, right? This is Neptune's house. And of course, here's the father with Saturn. And once Varese left home, he never spoke to his father again. And if you talk to some of his contemporaries, like Olivier Messiaen, who's a little bit later, or Pierre Boulez, he would discuss an open hatred for his father, an open hatred, even at an advanced age. So he's a Cancer rising, and he's very choleric. That's the word that I would use, choleric, and very temperamental and very moody. And he winds up doing very well. He was an engineer. He studied math and science, and he knew, like, he was friends with a lot of the more famous artists, during the turn of the century in Paris. He was part of that kind of lost generation scene. And I think in 1915, he moves to the United States. And at that time, he was going through his Mars return, which is interesting. And then transiting Uranus was in his 9th house in Aquarius, as well as the true node. So, he sets out for the United States in 1915 to become more engaged in these new ideas of composition. He's really, in a lot of ways, he's also influenced by, pieces like The Rite of Spring and Tchaikovsky, but he's in a lot of ways really the first modern composer. And he wrote a piece mainly for percussion called Ionization. Varese is a futurist, and you can see this with Aquarius on his midheaven, right? He's moving towards the future, and he has Uranus. Somebody asked me about Zappa's chart yesterday with Uranus. And the question he asked referred in a lot of ways to Varese's Uranus ingress into the 5th house, because he is very avant-garde and very experimental with creativity. So we're going to just, move that Uranus over there. And he's got this grand trine with Uranus and Venus and Pluto and Neptune. So the gods of the chart are moving Varese, right? He's one of these people that's possessed with almost an archetypal spirit. Like, there's only one Edgard Varese. There will never be another Edgard Varese because of the things that he was doing. He was essentially exploring the realms of composition in ways that other composers weren't even thinking about. He was very interested in Eastern instruments and things like gongs. And he had kind of an Oriental and transcendent sort of philosophy that he brought into his music as well. He's musically restless, right? He's got Mars and Leo. It's very creative. It's in the 3rd house. So again, it's like super restless, but it trines his sun. And he's somebody that's capable of tremendous force, right? And he's born on the equinox, and he has this phenomenal ability to span ages. He was inspired when he was younger by medieval music and the music of the Renaissance. And one of his favorite composers was Monteverdi, who's, comes out of this Baroque tradition. And yet he's trying to create a music for the future, a music that doesn't exist yet. It only exists in his mind, right? And then we have these inconjuncts again, Pluto and Jupiter right here in this yod with his sun, and he's compelled, right? He's totally compelled to do something bigger and larger than what's been done before. And he's got Jupiter and Leo, so he's got big ideas, right? And the sort of the limitations of his time, I think probably were quite frustrating for Varese. But eventually he finds things like tape recorders and tape loops and begins to create the kind of music that he was hearing in his head. And I believe it's the 1958 World's Fair in Brussels, Belgium, where he collaborates with the architect Le Corbusier, I hope I pronounced his name correctly, for this very futuristic pavilion. And they're doing things that are just way ahead of their time. They're projecting all these images of things like ritual masks and sort of images from Tibetan Buddhism and explosions. I mean, they're really going in for this kind of totality of the sensorium. And Varese is given the permission to create an electronic composition, which lasts about 8 minutes. And they have all these speakers, like 400 different speakers all over this pavilion that Le Corbusier created. And so really this thing was about 8 minutes long, but it was unlike anything that anybody had ever done. And I think Varese was outside of the pavilion one day, and he asked these kids who were about 10 years old, well, what did you think of that? And they said, well, this is the 4th time we've been here, and every time we come, we bring somebody new. So if you go back and look at that, that was 1958. So those kids were born in 1948, roughly. And so they're boomers, right? Even though they're European, they're boomers. And that kind of installation would seed the ideas ultimately for people like Karl-Heinz Stockhausen, the group Can, sort of the anti-art, right? And Varese, living in New York, he listened to a lot of jazz. He loved jazz. And what was interesting was that now this may be politically incorrect, but this is his quote, right? He said that Jewish composers were essentially stealing from Black jazz musicians. Those were his words, not mine. And he cited people like Aaron Copland. It's kind of like, you're appropriating their music, right? And it's like, well, that's interesting. Not only was he ahead of his time, but he was kind of fearless in his criticism of his musical contemporaries. He wasn't anti-Semitic or anything. He just noticed what was going on. So he kind of has this breakdown, and he winds up going to move to New Mexico. And so he's living in New Mexico, and he's taking on these healing treatments. And eventually one of his patrons gives him some canvases and some paints, and he begins to paint. And his paintings are phenomenal, really phenomenal. And he comes up with what is considered to be his classic work called Deserts. And it premiered in Paris, and it had the exact same effect on people that the Rite of Spring had when Stravinsky premiered it right at the turn of the century on the spring equinox, right? So he created a piece of music that was confrontational. And for Varese, it was like, don't bring your own preconceived notions of how to listen to the composition. Allow it to move you, right? React to it. And he's a very interesting character. Now, what's fascinating is that yesterday we had Frank Zappa as the star of the day. This is Frank Zappa's biggest influence in his life, is Edgard Varese. So they're born a day apart. And so there's something about that 29th degree of Sagittarius and the 0 degree of Capricorn where the intersection between Zappa and Varese meets, right? And Zappa's got all those planets in Virgo too. And so, we have, he had Moon in Virgo and Neptune in Virgo. So that'd be down here, and he'd be almost like a musical artistic member of Varese's family. He's a very complex character. His relationships, by and large, were not good. I think he had 2 children. Marriages did not last long. He was a guy that was obsessed and consumed by sound. And you can see that with that true note in Scorpio, right? That once he got into something, he would get into it and he would not let it go. And he's a very fascinating character, driven by unseen forces. He's almost, in a lot of ways, like a sonic prophet. He's able to hear sort of the world that's coming even before it gets here. So there's your True Hemp Science star of the day, Edgard Varese. Now remember, if you want CBD and the best CBD you can find on the internet, please go to truehempscience.com and type in 15MINS when you spend $100 or more, and you will get free goodies with your order. $150 or more gets you free shipping, and there's always a 30-day money-back guarantee. That's truehempscience.com. 15 mins is your checkout code for your free goodies, and we're wishing our buddy Chris a very Merry Christmas. And with that, I wish you all a very Merry Christmas and a happy holiday and a sacred Saturnalia. Because guess what? We're out of here. Well, we'll see you on Tuesday. For sure. We'll see you on Tuesday. All right, let's put a lot of music. Get on out of here.